Just making sure that we are going to be pressing. Okay, recording is started, so we're good to go. So today we are going to go do an overview of the CMS for Developer Certification course. We are going to give you some tips and tricks for passing the final exam, and also for the practicum as well, because there are 2 different elements that you must pass in order to get your certification. And we'll have time for a Q&A and then a little bit of an activity at the end. So yeah, let's get started.
All right, so yeah, if you have any questions that come up during the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat. We can definitely address them during the Q&A. So yeah, let's dive in. So quick overview of the CMS for Developers certification course. It's 6 lessons in length, about 150 minutes, so about 25 minutes per lesson. So I really like the course. Brooke and I have both gone through it. I think it's really comprehensive. I learned a lot as I took it. So yeah, it was a really good course, I thought. And so you'll learn how to use the HubSpot CMS tools, create all different kinds of assets, and really you can really help out your workflows and work really, really efficiently. It's a really powerful set of tools, I think. You'll learn about using Hubble, templating with Hubble, using the HubSpot CLI, building templates, building modules, building themes, which was recently added to the course, which was a great update, along with updating the practicum, and then also using HubDB. So there's a lot in there, a lot to learn, a lot that you can leverage as a developer. And then you can also join the Slack channel. We'll talk about that more later. If you're not familiar with the Slack channel, it's a great resource for developers, and a lot of people use it to get their questions answered. And then the final exam is 40 questions. You need 30 to be answered correctly to pass, so 75%. You have 3 hours to complete the exam, so plenty of time. We'll have some tips on passing the exam, but you can always download the scripts and that kind of stuff if you need to find what you're looking for. If you fail, you have 12 hours before you can retake the exam. So if you fail, no big deal. You'll always have another chance to do it. And then of course there's a practicum component that you need to complete in order to pass. And that's kind of a interesting and fun part about this certification, which I think really makes it really interesting. Cool.
All right, so let's talk about some tips and tricks for passing the final exam. Like Ben mentioned, you can download all of the scripts for any of the videos so that you can use them in order to help you better your learning. If you are a person who likes to print things out, you can take notes that way on the scripts directly. You can also test your knowledge with quizzes that are offered at the end of each lesson. The quizzes are 3 to 4. Just make sure to do a little comprehension check between each lesson, because each lesson is pretty dense with a lot of information. So we want to make sure that you are really getting that information in while you're watching those videos. Also, make sure to take your time when answering your question. This is not one of those things where you can go back and skip questions if you don't know the answer. You have to answer the question in order to move forward to the next one. So take your time to answer that question. That's why you have those 3 hours available to you, so that you don't have to feel like you need to rush to get all of the questions answered in a specific amount of time. And if you fail the exam, it's totally okay. The exam, like Ben said, you can retake it again in 12 hours. And so I would say if you fail, I would look through download that resource that tells you exactly the kinds of things that you maybe didn't understand well enough, and then consider going through the content as a refresher and seeing all of those things that you might not have been able to grasp the first time around on the exam. And also, before you start the exam, just make sure that you're in a quiet place that has reliable internet connection. You don't want to get disconnected while you're doing the exam, and you also don't want to be disrupted. So if you are working from home, just make sure that you have a place where you can shut the door and just let people know that you're not going to be available for an hour or so, because you really want to focus on doing well on the exam.
All right, so we're going to go over this slide. We're going to sort of get into the nitty gritty of the practicum. It's kind of a really big element to passing, to getting certified. Brooke and I went through a whole bunch actually this morning together. It's always fun to grade these. So yeah, this is kind of a big element that, it takes some thought and effort to complete the practicum. So there's a lot to kind of go over. So we'll go over some general tips and tricks on this slide. And then we also have some prepared like Google Chrome tabs that we'll look at specific elements, sometimes things that trip people up that we thought might be helpful to share with you all. And again, as we go through any of this, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can definitely address them in the Q&A. So yeah, tips and tricks for passing the practicum. Yeah, you can create a Sandbox CMS account for this exercise, or an app test account also would work, just so you can have that environment to work in and get access to all the tools. You can use the boilerplate is a really great resource. I mean, Jeff addresses it in the course, and it's in the resources. The boilerplate is a great place to look if you're sort of wondering, scratching your head about how to address certain things. I reference the boilerplate all the time, and I was able to take inspiration from it when I completed my practicum. Jeff also notes this in the instructions. You can use the layout.css. You'll need to use the layout.css file from the boilerplate in order to get the drag and drop to have the drag and drop work correctly. You can build it locally using the HubSpot CLI or in the design manager and the design tools. So either one will work. Subject of the theme is up to you. If you're not a fan of cats, feel free to use any topic you'd like. Just this morning, we saw, what do we see, Brooke? We got
Rickrolled. And they played the audio from the song.
Yeah.
It was great. It was very fun. So creativity is 100% encouraged, because we want this to be a fun exercise for you. It's not meant to take a long time. No more than 2 to 5 hours, I would say, is the amount of time that you should spend on this practicum. And put forth your best effort. We enjoy seeing that creativity and the mastery of technique. So if you really want to do well on the practicum and you want to surprise us and give us a big smile on our face, we would love to see the creativity that you put into this practicum.
Yeah, that Rickrolled one was a great one. Like Brooke said, it played the audio when you hovered over a certain element on the page. So we also got llamas this morning. I have seen chickens also recently. Star Trek, yeah, there's, the sky's the limit. So have fun with it. It is definitely a fun exercise. So yeah, now I'm gonna exit the presentation and just go into a few things that we were gonna look at. Just getting into the sort of the nitty gritty of the practicum, things that commonly we see people maybe omit or something like that. So let me do that. I'll just start here with the instructions. This is always a great place to start if you're going to work on the practicum, obviously. So, yeah, you're building a theme. That's the whole practicum. And then Jeff has provided a really good basic structure here. Your CSS folder, your modules folder, your templates you're going to have pretty much one main template file with maybe a partials folder with a header and footer, and then your fields.json and theme.json, which you need. So I'll just real quick share my practicum folder structure, which is basically just the things that I went over. So it's that you can see that there. And then I think we'll jump into some of the specifics, Brooke, from our notes. So
yes.
Do you want to talk about the sort of the team module and the repeating field groups?
Yes. So one of the biggest things that we have seen that is an issue for people is this team module. So when you're creating this team module, the way that you can do it really easily in the design tools, which will help you out, because you can use the GUI in order to say, I want an image field, I want a text field, and I want a description field, and then you can group them together by using the GUI rather than having to know how to code that out manually. So I recommend using that. That's what I did to help with that. And the reason why you want it to be in a field group is because you need this to be editable by editors. If they were to take this template and they needed to have 4 to 5 people in the team, you want to make it a field group that is looped over so that they can continue to add as many people as they need to the specific module so that it's able to be reused. The screen share after this presentation, yes, Daisy, we are going to be sharing this recording out with everybody so that you will all be able to watch it, scrub back through anything if we were talking too quickly, just so you can get all that stuff. And another thing about this part that is really important is the mobile responsiveness. So in the desktop layout, you want it to be 3 columns wide, and then you want to add a breakpoint so that it can nicely scroll to a 2 column wide, so it looks good on smaller screens. And you can write that directly inside of the module because the module has 3 different places. It has the HTML and Hubble section, the CSS section, and the JS section. For this practicum, you will not need to be writing any JS. You'll mainly just be focusing on writing HTML, Hubble, and CSS. And so that's the main parts that you want to focus on when it comes to using this module. And in order to add your module to your test page that you create, you can either drag and drop it into a drag and drop area that you create, or you can write it directly into your template, right into there. You can just call that module using whatever nomenclature that you called it. So this one is called leaders. So you just call that leaders module inside of your template. Cool.
Yeah.
And the next thing that we focus on is the CSS component. And one of the biggest things about the CSS is that we need you to add in a fields.json file so that you can go through and make things customizable for the editor on the front end experience when they're editing the page, so that it's a GUI experience for them. If they need to change the font, if they need to change the color, that they have that option available. So you can read more on the developer docs about fields.json. It'll break down exactly how the fields need to be written and also how they can be called within your CSS. So that's one thing that we're definitely looking for, is making sure that you create your fields.json and that you call them properly within your CSS file.
Definitely. Yeah, and then in addition to that, you want to make sure that you have your footer and header in global partials. So you have to use the correct syntax to get the to use the template partials in that way. One thing we also will tend to look at is you just want to make sure that within your theme there are no errors found in like the main files that you include, like your module, your basic your main template that's generating the page that you create. And then yeah, another main thing we sometimes see is you have to use the just like in the GIF here, you want to make sure that you have a drag and drop area. And this is a great GIF that Jeff set up here to make sure that in your template, this image and text area is default content within your template. And then for that, if you're ever curious about maybe how that would look, you can always check out the docs. I've looked at the boilerplate. The about.html has a great example of using default image and text modules to create that default content. So that's just a little, sometimes we see that people will omit that. Yeah.
And I would also say for the drag and drop area, the video that Jeff made on how to create drag and drop is a great resource. So if you need to remember how to do those steps, just go back and watch that video, maybe make it a little bit slower and follow along with what he's doing, because he's showing you exactly the steps that you need to do in order for the drag and drop areas to be completed.
I see a really great tip here from Dennis. If you are building locally and you're building a module locally, you can copy JSON. Oh, for the fields.json file. Okay, yeah, that's great to know. Yeah, and your fields.json file, you can copy that if you're developing locally, because yeah, it can be maybe more convenient to do it that way rather than typing out the JSON tree. That's great. Cool. So I'm going to jump back into the presentation. Those were all of the notes that we had, kind of getting into the nitty gritty of the practicum and things that we tend to see. All right. So that kind of opens us up for Q&A. If anyone has any questions or any other notes, things that they had been struggling with or anything like that, we're definitely open to questions. And it looks like John is also posting another resource, VS Code extension, which lets you autocomplete fields, which is great. Awesome.
It's very helpful. It's super helpful, especially if you're not that familiar with Hubble tags. It does help you a lot, speed up the process if you're developing locally.
Cool. I don't see a ton of questions here, so we can even talk more about this, I think, Brooke.
So again, if you have any questions, please leave them in the chat. I think some of the biggest questions that we have are probably around the module and how to build that out. So I would just make sure that you are checking the developer docs. There's a great documentation on how to create modules, and just making sure that you are building them properly, because that's one of the biggest things that we see that we do not accept is if you build your module incorrectly or you do not include a module. So just make sure that you spend a lot of time getting that right. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us on the developer Slack. We're both on there, and sign up for the developer Slack so that you can meet with other people and talk with them. There is a bunch of different Slack channels that you can join. And if you're new to developing, there's different places where you can talk to people and ask questions about all of that. John said that he recommends joining the Academy Courses channel. That's a great channel where you can just ask any questions that you have about any of the Academy courses, have any questions about how to do anything that we're asking you all to do in your practicum, or if you have any questions about the final exam questions, that is a great resource to use, not only to get in touch with us, but to all get in touch with other people in the community that have taken the practicum and taken the exam before.
Yeah, definitely. Like we have AJ, John, and Dennis all here who are active in the Slack. I've learned a lot from all of them. So if you do have a question, it's not just this one event where you can get your questions answered. Like there's really no reason why you couldn't get a question answered. Everyone's super helpful and super knowledgeable. So don't be afraid. The developer Slack is a really great resource that's offered. Cool. All right. Well, if nobody has questions,